Welcome to a special lottery edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside my guy from CBS Sports.com. Sam Quinn is here to walk me through it because I was on HQ previewing tonight's games, and all I heard, my phone started buzzing and going off and blowing up, and apparently the fix was in for the Mavs, and the Sixers are still alive, and chaos.
John, that was the craziest lottery I've ever seen. I pre-wrote half of the destinations for Cooper Flag just so we'd have like a news story to go up. You'll be shocked to hear that neither the number 1 nor the number 2 pick were pre-written. So that was a bit of a mess for CBSSports.com. You were not watching live. I also just want to point this out to get your reaction. They said on the broadcast that the Philadelphia 76ers had lost their pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder when the Spurs and the Mavericks jumped. And then they had to panic and circle back and go, oh, wait, no, actually the Sixers are still in it. We've had chaos in lotteries before where one team has jumped. We've never had chaos in the lottery for the entire top 4, and that's just what we got. I mean, the obvious place we have to start here is what an all-time bailout for Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks to go from losing their homegrown replacement for Dirk Nowitzki to immediately getting their homegrown replacement for Luka Doncic.
Yeah, so the lottery here, I don't know if we have any graphics or whatever to put up and show what happened in the lottery, but the Mavs end up with the number 1 pick. They had, according to the odds I have in front of me, a 1.8% chance of that happening. The Spurs end up at number 2. The Spurs get another high pick. That was a 6% chance. And then, as you mentioned, the Sixers left into the top 4. They end up at 3. They had at least a 10% chance at the top pick, but they end up at 3, and then the Hornets at 4. So, yeah, let's start with the Mavs at 1.8%. So, yet again, this is like people love to have lottery conspiracies, Sam, where the NBA is moving things around and gerrymandering who ends up with these picks in order to send certain players to certain franchises. And as you mentioned, Luka ends up going to Los Angeles, and people think, okay, well, 1.8%, there's no chance of them getting Cooper Flag. Nico Harrison right now doing wheelies on Luka's lawn at his house that he hasn't sold in Dallas, just like doing donuts. He's got to be thrilled right now.
I mean, this is a franchise-saving lottery, right? Maybe the single biggest example of a team's fortunes changing over the course of a single lottery in all of NBA history. I mean, I think we were both of the opinion that, like, Nico Harrison had to be fired before this, right? He had damaged the franchise to such an enormous extent. Now, look, Kyrie Irving's injury we can't predict that. Maybe he's back and ready to go in March. Maybe he doesn't play at all next year. But you found the long-term homegrown replacement star before you lose all of your picks, right? Because they're not going to have their picks in 27, 28, 29, or 30. This year and next year were their last chances to get somebody like this who could carry them forward for the next decade, and they pulled it off. Plus, like, next year, you have Anthony Davis, you have Cooper Flag, maybe you have Kyrie. We can talk about what else they might do. Personally, I'd be thinking trade Kyrie, but you have a chance to be really good next year. Like, a team that looked like it was dead in the water is now right back in the mix.
Didn't the Hawks jump up pretty big last year too? Didn't they have
from 10? Yeah.
Okay, so not quite as bad, but this is pretty significant to have a 1.8% chance of getting the first pick and to land it. It really does bail out the Mavericks franchise. And now all of a sudden, things that had been previously really dark and bleak, and I'm with you that Nico Harrison, who knows how much time he could have bought himself if they hadn't landed this top pick. Now all of a sudden you get Cooper Flag, and you'll see what happens they still have to determine what's going on with Kyrie's contract. Anthony Davis, I thought maybe they would have moved on from him, or he would have wanted to move on. Now, all of a sudden, they're back in the mix in a loaded Western Conference, but also the Spurs landing at 2. How loaded are they? Just as the Giannis sweepstakes come up here, right? Now, all of a sudden, I was talking about this on HQ with Chris Walker and Chris Williamson about, okay, you've got Wemby, and you've got Stephon Castle, and now you've got a high pick at 2, and now potentially you could get in on the Giannis sweepstakes. Would you keep the 2, or if it requires moving the 2 in order to get Giannis, are you moving on from the 2 and getting Giannis?
Well, the number 2 pick is presumably Dylan Harper, who is a scoring guard. And if you just look at that roster, they have Stephon Castle already, and they just traded for De'Aaron Fox. it really doesn't make sense for them to go into next season with all three of those players on their roster. They're not going to trade Fox because they just traded for him.
Who do you like better between Stephon and uh
Harper.
Bailey or Harper? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable in the Dylan Harper camp there.
Okay.
Personally, like, I don't know if I've made this comparison with you, but I think I've made it on the show somewhere. There are some Michael Carter Williams vibes with Stephon Castle. Not that I think he's like, I think
He's
he's a
way
better
bigger and
player.
more athletic.
Right. No, I'm not saying he's going to be like a bust, but I look at the Sixers trading him at the peak of his value after winning Rookie of the Year when they just determined he wasn't going to be a fit with what they had, and that looking pretty prescient. I wonder if there's a chance here for the Spurs to go get, whether it's Giannis or somebody else, using Castle as the bait because he has all of the sheen as the Rookie of the Year, when actually, like, it probably didn't make sense for them to keep a non-shooting guard on a team with Fox. And I mean, you could have made it work with Wemby, and the talent was so overwhelming that, like, okay, you could have figured it out. Personally, I would be thinking I want Harper and Fox as my long-term backcourt, or if I'm going to go get Giannis, like, if it takes both, it takes both. If you have Fox, Giannis, and Wemby, you might win the championship next year.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, if you're the Spurs, you have to feel really good about just the optionality that you have here. Whether, and I take your word for being firmly in Harper's camp and not in Stephon Castle's camp. I have seen Stephon Castle play. This is the time of year where Bill and I bring on experts who have actually watched college basketball, kids, because we don't have time to watch college basketball. I want to know how you fit it in. You're coming on and writing about professional basketball all the time. Generally, you have to pick one, right? Like, we're specialists here. And most of the people who cover the NBA for a living, like we do, very few of them have, like, we know the names, but we haven't actually seen these kids play.
Yeah, I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on the entire class, but I usually try to be well versed in the top handful of guys. So I watched, a decent amount of Rutgers this year. I'm very, very high on Dylan Harper. I'm not at all high on Ace Bailey, at least relative to the field there. So I look at Dylan Harper and I say, like, the name that comes to mind for me is Jalen Brunson. He's bigger. He's going to take time to get to that place, but he's such an advanced scorer for his age. He's so good with his footwork inside of the arc. I'm very bullish on him eventually becoming an all-star scorer, but I don't want to, like with Bailey, I think it's such an outline of, like, maybe he's Kevin Durant, maybe he's Brandon Ingram, maybe he's Anthony Randolph, who's to say. At the top two, I really like to feel some degree of certainty. If I'm taking the lottery ticket swing, probably a little bit further down, but don't assume that I know everything on every prospect. It's really the top few guys. I'll start to learn more as we get closer, but Harper is a favorite of mine. I love Jalen Brunson as a New Yorker, so any player that draws comparisons to him is going to catch my attention.
I want to get into Ace Bailey and the Sixers and all the other teams that tumbled down the lottery odds here. I want to go back to the Mavs for just a second. Looks like we have a little comment here. Never forget, if the Mavs didn't win the coin flip against Chicago after the season was over, they would be drafting 12th this year. So it could have been Chicago.
John, there's so many layers of this to unpack.
That's a great point by producer and by our guy who's put the comment up on YouTube there.
How many times all year did we tell the Bulls, you're not tanking hard enough, you should be tanking harder, trading Levine for your pick back is crazy. Not only do the Bulls or do the Mavericks jump up from that 11 spot, but the Spurs jumped up from 8 as well. So if the Bulls had just tanked a little bit harder, they might have a top 2 pick right now. If they lost one more game and that coin flip doesn't happen, everything is entirely different for Chicago right now. So I feel like, I know karmically we shouldn't feel great with Dallas winning after the Luka trade, but at least the Bulls are getting punished for not tanking properly.
Yeah, well, but you and I also were talking about how fun the Bulls were towards the end of the season, and we were enjoying watching them play basketball, and Kobe White zip up and down the floor, and Josh Giddey not look like a complete waste of space. And so for a little bit, and I have some friends in Chicago, and I asked them about that, and I said, how do you feel about the direction of the franchise? And they had said, one of my buddies had said, they have been bad for so long, I'm just enjoying watching some entertaining basketball. I wonder now if they're going back on that, where they're like kicking themselves for just like having a small little like couple month run where they weren't like completely putrid to watch, and now they're drafting 12th instead of first.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is okay for them as like an ownership, as a front office situation where it's like all they really care about is like, let's be 500 and let's sell tickets. I think the fan base is going to be quietly devastated once this sets in, because all they've been asking for so long is like, just tank, please, just once, get us our top prospect guy. I know it was fun down the stretch, but like they're kind of locked into what they have right now to an extent, unless maybe Modest Buzelis really breaks out. So it is a little bit disappointing, especially like, we've had a New York renaissance this year with the Knicks being good again. It'd be cool to have the Bulls get good again. The league, it's good for the league when the Bulls are entertaining. And right now, they're kind of just in the middle.
Man, that is heartbreaking. Thank you so much to the commenter, well, who reminded us about that coin flip. I had forgotten about it. I want to thank everybody for joining us on YouTube. Hit that like button, leave a comment on something we said or something that you thought about, and then subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then if you click on the little bell symbol, you'll get notified when we go live. We're doing a live show now. After the lottery, we'll be doing a live show tomorrow night with Sam Quinn. Sam, I think you're on that show. We'll discuss that afterwards. Sam's going to be on with us afterwards.
There's basketball to discuss.
There's so much. There's basketball all the time. Tomorrow night after the games, come and join us live on YouTube. We're going to take a quick time out here. Don't go anywhere. We have to discuss the Sixers somehow leapfrogging into the top three, along with the two Texas teams, the Jazz and the Wizards. They tumbled a little bit. The Nets stayed put. The Rockets at 10. And on and on and on. I have to ask Sam about his opinion about Ace Bailey, who he said he's not thrilled with or not super excited about. I guess that means he's a future Sixer. We'll discuss that on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc, a special live lottery show on YouTube. The Mavs defy the odds, a 1.8% chance of getting the first pick. They got it. Some might say the fix was in. The conspiracy theorists are definitely going to have a field day with this one. Then the Spurs, Greg Popovich had previously said that the Spurs deserve no more luck when it comes to lotteries. Well, they got more luck. They end up with the 2 pick. And then the Sixers, who I was absolutely convinced, Sam, we're going to ship the pick that was top 1 to 6 protected to Oklahoma City because it was that kind of year. Somehow I'm on HQ. I'm previewing the games that are coming up tonight, and my phone starts exploding. And I'm like, okay, I guess that they shipped the pick. No, it goes the other way. You wrote a story saying that the Sixers are one of the luckiest teams in lottery history. I beg to differ with your interpretation on it, but they got the pick. They end up at the number 3 spot. They had just shy 48% chance. 42% chance of landing in the top 4. They land at number 3. But now you're telling me that the guy who most people think would be the next guy up, Ace Bailey, you're not a fan.
No, I'm not. I want to stress, I think he's a lottery ticket, right? I think there's a 10% chance you're looking at somebody who's like a high-end all-NBA guy, a big forward who can score with incredible defensive upside. Like, the tools are all there. I just think he's so raw at this stage. I'd be a little concerned taking him certainly 3.
If you go SAR level raw, what kind of raw?
No, he's further along than that. I think last year's class was kind of an anomaly. You sort of have to throw it away there. I just think like he has to bulk up physically. I think he's kind of inconsistent. The shot making is really, really incredible. I don't know that he's quite as good as like a standstill shooter. I don't know how he'll fit in on like a team trying to win right away. I think he'd be better suited going to a team that's a little bit younger and a little bit more patient that can actually bring him along. The guy I would personally really like for Philly at number 3 is VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, he's a little bit smaller for a wing, but he's an incredible athlete. The 3-point shot really started to come along last year. He played big games in FIBA for the Bahamas last year, on that team with DeAndre Ayton and Buddy Hield and Eric Gordon. Like, he's somebody who's actually played meaningful basketball before. And I think at the very least with him, you're getting somebody who's going to be like viable 3-and-D. The real upside comes in the athleticism. He's not like an Amen Thompson level athlete, but he's a level below that. Like the height or the speed, jumping, like that sort of stuff. Really, really outrageous. I think he's the guy you take where the upside exists, where taking him at 3 is like feasible. However, even if he doesn't hit that ceiling, I'm confident he's going to be like a good NBA player. Whereas with Bailey, it's just like all over the map. You might get an all NBA guy, you might get a bust.
Yeah, Aaron is saying that in terms of Ace Bailey, that there are rumors about his height, that he claims to be 6'10", but that he's closer to 6'8", and some scouts are concerned. We're going to find out. This is what the combine is for. I'm getting conflicting reports here, though, because I was just on HQ, and there are other people that I know and I trust and I like and I think are smart like yourself who are less bullish on Edgecombe. One of them, who's super high on Ace Bailey, I was just on with Tim Doyle from CBS Sports, and he was talking about how he saw Ace Bailey in person when Dylan Harper hadn't played, and that he was wowed by Ace Bailey and thinks that he's going to be a star in the league. So like after what Cooper flagged, there's like a lot of variance. So I'm getting a lot of different opinions on these guys who could go 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I mean, look, somebody's going to be wrong about Ace Bailey. Like that's just the reality. Like there's a wide range of opinions on him, and I think there's a very, very wide range of outcomes. What people see when they see a star in him, it's there. It's not like coming out of nowhere. It's just the tools are there. I need to see it more consistently, and I kind of hope he's not going to Philly because I think, look, this is the Tobias Harris thing, right? Where Tobias Harris just sort of stands around in the corner in Philly and he becomes a laughingstock. Then he goes to Detroit and he's more involved in the system and like he looks like a good NBA player again. I don't think Philly is the right place for him, is all I'm saying.
Well, the Philly's not the right place for anybody. Like in terms of basketball, it's a wonderful city. It's an underrated city. I recommend everybody go. All of a sudden I'm doing like a tourism board. Everybody should go and check out Philadelphia. The restaurants are fantastic and there's history and all that stuff. As a basketball place, it's a disaster. Now, you just like went through all the things that Ace Bailey does. You said he's big. You said he's a forward. You said he can shoot. I'm sorry. Are those not all the things that Philadelphia 76ers could use?
Well, they are, but like, what's your timeline here, right? Are you thinking in terms of the Embiid George? Like, are you trying to win next year, or are you already thinking ahead and thinking we have Maxey, we have McCain, we have Grimes who's younger? Are we just sort of building a young core on the side, and then Embiid and George, if they're healthy, great, we'll throw that on top of that. I just think he's somebody who would benefit from being on a team where he can kind of explore his skill set a little bit more early on. Whereas if George and Embiid are healthy, I'd be really afraid that Bailey is joining a team where he's just going to shoot 6, 7, 8 times a game instead of the 15 he probably needs.
The answer to your question about are they looking at, or if I'm in their shoes, looking at next season or the future, the answer is yes. Can I interest you in what famously worked for the Golden State Warriors, a little simultaneous 2 timeline scenario?
Well, we can also go the other way here. If you do want to commit to a timeline, like having the number 3 pick as a trade chip is pretty interesting. Like,
interesting.
Do you combine number 3 with Paul George and see, like, is there a better offer out there for Kevin Durant? Is there another guy out there that you think might make sense for them? Because, like, there is I know talking about Embiid's health is ultimately a wasted conversation because he never ultimately is healthy, but you kind of have to think he might be. If Embiid is healthy, you kind of have the outline of a contending team there, right? Like, with Maxey and Embiid, Grimes was a revelation for them. McCain is going to be very good. Like, you might have a chance to win something right now. Is that something that you go for?
Initially, when you said packaging the 3 with PG, I thought you were mentioning it as a way to get off of PG's onerous contract. But when you brought up the Suns, I was like, yeah, maybe they're the team that's dumb enough to do that deal. And all of a sudden they end up with Beal and PG, 2 of the 3 worst contracts. 2 of the 4, I guess, because now you have to add in Dame after the Achilles blowout. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's a way that you decide, okay, we're not going to take one of these kids. And look, Daryl Morey, despite the fact that this past season went as badly as it could possibly go, having another critical asset, a big, attractive, something nice and shiny that you can dangle in front of somebody else's face, it's not nothing. All right, what else stood out to you from the lottery here? You have the Hornets at 4, the Jazz and the Wiz, who are horrendous all season, not rewarded. They fall to 5 and 6. The Pelicans are at 7. The Nets, who a lot of people have their eyes on because they're going to have a ton of cap space, they got a lot of picks, they fall to 8. Anything else here jump out at you?
Okay, so I want to talk about the lottery structure for a minute here. Like, is there any part of you that thinks it's a little odd that play-in teams can jump up to number 1? Because this has now happened 2 years in a row. And I know we're going to ultimately look at the Jazz and the Wizards and the Hornets and say like, oh, they'll get somebody decent. Is it a great place for the NBA to be where you can be that bad all year and then like the Mavericks can just parachute in after having traded Luka and be like, we'll take Cooper Flag. Thanks for that. And you're just going to be here again next year. I know we do lottery reform every few years. I know we just did it a few years ago. Is this maybe a signal that we should change it again?
Well, I wasn't on board with them changing it in the first place because all of a sudden, like Sam Hinkie comes in and they end up like the league freaks out because he's decided to tank hard and try to get as many draft picks as possible. And then I think they way overcorrected to your point where now all of a sudden, like they go with the play-in, which I think is a rousing success. It's been fantastic. But yeah, I mean, if you're the Mavs, you get bailed out here with a 1.8% chance of getting the first pick and you get the first pick, and the Jazz and the Wizards could absolutely use some relief. And, I don't know. I know that this draft, and we're going to do more draft shows as we go forward here, but this draft is obviously considerably deeper and there's a lot more talent than what you saw last season. But at 5-6, like you got to get luckier.
Yeah, it feels a little dirty to me. The whole point of the draft, the reason the draft exists as a mechanism for player dispersal is that theoretically the worst teams in the league need to get access to the best talent so that they can no longer be the worst teams in the league. I think the league got so afraid of tanking that they went too far in the other direction, where now like we have a situation where like the Jazz could be at the bottom of the league for 5 years with no way out. Is that really what we want? I'm not sure that it is, right? The Wizards now, like I think we both kind of like the young guys that they have, but they've had 2 years of like truly abominable tanking because they've had to, because that's their best chance. They know they're not going to lure a free agent star to come sign with them. They have to draft him. It maybe isn't the best for the league when a team like that hasn't done anything wrong, but it's just kind of in that natural stage of their life cycle to be picking 6. I think we might need some degree of reform to say only the top 10 are in the lottery, right? You can decide, do you want to be in the lottery or do you want to compete for the playoffs? Some owners are going to treat that differently than others, right? I remember, I think it was Masai Ujiri during that Tampa tank, but somebody asked him about the play-in versus the lottery, and he kind of said, like, oh, what does the play-in mean to us? Like, not much if you're a team that's trying to compete for titles. But I look at this and I go, I feel bad for the Hornets and the Jazz and the Wizards, who are teams that like they're not bad for reasons the NBA should be upset about. They're just bad because they're bad. And at any given time in the NBA cycle, there are going to be a handful of young teams that kind of need to get good players on the way up. They have to wait another year. And like just by the law of this, only one team gets to win the lottery every year. Like one of those teams is going to be picking 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th next year. And we might have a situation where 1 or 2 or more of these teams are just sort of stuck at the bottom, and that sits a little badly with me.
You're our lottery reform guy, so I trust that you'll figure out a way to fix this thing. I wanted to just go back to something else that you had said about how you didn't want, who was it? Was it Edgecombe or Bailey? You didn't want anybody to land with the Sixers, but the Sixers are at 3. Then you've got the Hornets at 4, who I think have been a disaster forever. And I don't like pairing anybody with LaMelo Ball because he's just like out there like a dancing bear on roller skates, jacking up shots like it's a circus. And then you've got the Jazz, who have, as you just mentioned, are in a tough spot now. And the Wizards, who have been horrible forever. Of those teams, like if you were a player in this draft, is there one of those scenarios that you'd be like, okay, I'd be okay with it? Because 3 through 6, I'm like, I don't want to go to any of these teams.
The team I'd want to get to would be Utah for a few reasons. Number one, I think Will Hardy is a genius. We've gone over this on the show before. He hasn't had the roster to like really stand out as one of the best coaches in the NBA.
Plus,
I think he's just, well, yeah, like you're on a franchise that knows what it's doing, right? Number one, there's like a little bit of personal validation to that, where like I know an agent who's had a couple of players who have gone to the Grizzlies and has always felt really good about that, because it's like the Grizzlies always draft well. So if they take my guy, it means like, oh, great, I've got a winner on my hands. There's something to that when you're talking about a smart front office. So I think there's something to that. And they have so many assets that like you can. All right, what's your contention?
Well, my contention is all of what you're saying makes sense from an academic basketball standpoint, that you and I sit here as nerds and like look at asset allocation and front office and who's smart and the head coach is brilliant. And wouldn't that be a good spot from a basketball environment? If you're an 18-year-old kid, and I'm going to say this very softly for all of our Jazz fan listeners. Do you want to go to Salt Lake City?
No, but look at the other teams in that range. Do you want to go to Charlotte? Do you want to go to New Orleans? Like, I think New
I mean,
Orleans is
yeah,
a
New
team.
Orleans is an awesome city.
Well, it is, but how'd they do Zion, right? Like, is that a team that if you
How'd they
look
do
at
AD before that?
and Chris Paul before that, like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think if you're a top prospect, you kind of look at the Pelicans and say this is a preposterously cheap organization that has had so many chances with top young talents and has squandered all of them. I think the most important thing is getting to a franchise that's going to develop you properly. And like the Jazz, by and large, have done that, right? Donovan Mitchell was the 13th pick. And I know he's not in Utah anymore, but I think getting to Utah to start his career was pretty helpful for him, right? Rudy Gobert was the same thing. I know it's somewhat different management now, but I generally want to get to teams that know what they're doing. And the other benefit of being a top 5 pick for the Jazz is that I know they have Lauri Markkanen, but they don't really have like anyone that's so established there that if you really balled out when you got there to start, you could be the franchise player there within like 2 months, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like you're going to a team where you're told immediately, you need to fit around this guy. You need to do this because this is stylistically the team that we have. Houston, if they had jumped up, like if you would have gone there, it would have been a lot of like, you have to shoot threes because that's what we don't have. Or, you know, if you go to some team with a franchise star already, I think as a young player, you kind of like the idea of going to a blank slate. If you have, like, if you really play as well as you can pretty quickly become the franchise player. And I think getting to Utah gives you a chance where if you do become like a cornerstone for them, they have so many assets that they can go out and surround you with the guys that you need.
That's true. That's true. I mean, you make good points there, but I just keep coming back to my default position of Salt Lake City. I mean, and I'm sorry about that, Salt Lake City. Like, it's a beautiful place, but in terms of like NBA destination cities, it's pretty low on the totem pole.
Well, let's go the other way then. Brooklyn is sitting there at number 8.
Sure.
I have to imagine there will be prospects in this range of the draft who look at those teams at 4, 5, 6, and 7 and kind of say, I'd kind of like to be in New York. And they have that blank slate thing going for them too. They have all of those Knicks picks. They have all of those assets. Now, I think if you go to the Nets, you might pretty quickly be rerouted for a star. That's another conversation. But I wonder if there will be some agent shenanigans here where somebody who might otherwise have gone 5th or 6th winds up going number 8 because they really wanted to direct themselves to the Nets. I think they're probably, from a player standpoint, probably a team that's going to be pretty desirable here.
Well, this is something Bill and I talked about this morning when the Giannis news broke that Giannis is open to potentially moving on to someplace else, which is hardly a surprise given how that they're right now at present. They 80% of their cap is tied up in Kuzma and Dame and Giannis through 2027. They have very few ways that John Horst can improve that team unless they offload Giannis, which especially with Dame having the Achilles injury at the time of the season when he did, and like him being 35 and that contract and the whole bit, it just makes sense for them to reboot it. I think the Nets being where they are in this draft, having a bunch of other draft picks that they could dangle, plus cap space is going to be a very interesting offseason for Sean Marks. And then the Rockets at 10, that's another team that we earmarked that they've got a lot of draft capital. Plus they've got good young players. I know you and I were talking offline. We were texting one night about the Rockets in the first round about how, do you do something this offseason or do you leave it alone and let it bake for another season? I was team let it bake until Giannis put up his hand. It doesn't solve their spacing issues. It doesn't solve their shooting issues. But if you can get Giannis and you have to offload like, I don't know, Jalen Green, Tari Eason, and maybe like Jabari Smith or something, plus some first round picks. Like, I think you just figure out the spacing and the shooting later. Maybe Reed Shepherd is all of a sudden into the starting line or into the rotation where you're adding.
Oh, now you're speaking shooting. My language, John.
I know you love Reed and I do too. All I'm saying is those teams, Sam, the Nets, I got my eyes on the Nets. I got my eyes on the Pelicans because they control quite a bit of the Bucks draft. The Rockets at 10, potentially the Blazers at 11. I mean, these are teams that could potentially, like, if they're not directly involved in the honest sweepstakes, could be part of a 3-team trade. Just teams to keep an eye on it, but especially the Rockets.
Well, also the Spurs. I think the fact that they got number 2, whether or not they actually trade for Giannis, they are now the boogeyman of the Giannis sweepstakes because they have Castle and Vassell and number 2 and Sohan and all of these other picks from other teams where even if the Spurs don't go all in, every other team in these negotiations has to live with the reality that like the Spurs have the chance to top their offer, right? So you have to offer more if you want to go get him. I'm with you. I'm in the camp where I would probably prefer it if the Rockets just chill, like just wait. You've got something really interesting brewing here. Let's see where it goes over the next year or so before we go all in. My issue with Giannis to Houston is that you're not just putting Giannis on this team and having it make sense. If you're getting Giannis, you're rebuilding the entire roster to suit his skill set, right? Like
You need a lot more shooting.
You need a lot more shooting. I know a lot of people have said, "Oh, Amen Thompson is untouchable," and I think we agree that neither of us would want to trade Amen Thompson. Amen and Giannis don't really make sense together. So, like, I think if you were gonna do the Giannis thing, what you probably then.
Well, let's pause there, because I don't know that I agree with you that they don't necessarily make sense together. I mean, at the very least, you would have a ferocious defense, right? I mean, if Giannis is spending more time rim protecting and you've got Amen Thompson wreaking havoc on the perimeter, why doesn't offensively spacing gets real bad, which is why I'm saying they need a lot more shooting. But I don't know that I'd immediately just scrap that and be like, okay, what if was it you that I said, what if Amen is like miniature Russian nesting doll Giannis potentially?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't think that's that crazy, right? I think the offensive principles there are pretty similar. Of like, what if we have a guy that just doesn't really shoot, but gets to the rim like crazy and is a killer defender? It's not crazy. You know who would be a bad teammate for Giannis Antetokounmpo is Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? You wouldn't want two of them on the same team.
Okay,
there was a reason
fair.
that like the Bucks didn't go try to trade for Ben Simmons when he was available, right? Remember when that was the talking point? Remember when people would say, "Oh, if you just put four shooters around Ben Simmons, he could maybe do some of the stuff that Giannis does." Yeah. Like, there's a reason the Bucks weren't really getting in on that. So, look, again, you could try it, but I think the logical place to go if you trade for Giannis is then to turn around and say, who has the best scoring guard we can trade Amen Thompson for, right? Like, do we then offer Amen Thompson straight up for like, is Devin Booker even good enough? I don't even know if he is.
I'm not doing it. I mean, like he's on his rookie contract, and you're just scratching the surface of what that kid could be, right? There's no way when he's in the conversation in his second year for potential DPOY and makes all defense and like, no, he cannot shoot. But what happens if, let's say that they moved on from Jalen Green, right? And Fred VanVleet, who we all know and like, is super streaky. What if all of a sudden there's a point Amen situation going on there? Right? Like, I'm not moving on. To me, he's the untouchable on that roster.
And I'm with you on that. That's why I'm saying if I were the Rockets, I would be sitting the Giannis sweepstakes out.
Okay, fair enough. But I think that's easier said than done, because if somebody dangles Giannis in front of you and it's like a reasonable asking, reasonable, it's not going to be reasonable. But in terms of a team that has all those assets, the Rockets and the Spurs being chief of, I mean, we didn't even mention Oklahoma City. What happens? There's a world, Sam. Oklahoma City somehow doesn't get out of the second round. That they would be the first number one seed in NBA history to be a one seed in back-to-back seasons and not make the conference finals in back-to-back seasons. Does Sam Presti all of a sudden get a little itchy? He's been stockpiling these draft picks forever. All of a sudden, maybe they put up their hand and go, okay, we have the chance to offer the biggest package for Giannis that any pair him with SGA. I mean, like, it's possible is all I'm saying.
Well, the other side of that is, do they maybe consider Kevin Durant, who's a little bit cheaper, right? At least from an asset standpoint,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
Where like you might be able to get Durant without giving up like the best of your things, right? You could keep your core three of the young players. So Oklahoma City is really lurking here. I also, if we're going to go down the trade route, like I do wonder what this means for Dallas as far as their roster situation goes. I think we had both been on the train that they should trade Anthony Davis. I don't think that they will. I do look at this and say, if they can get a guard, they might be able to contend next year. And I think they would probably contend Kyrie Irving as that guard. I would say I probably wouldn't want to bank too much on that. But I look at this and I go, could you turn around, use Kyrie's salary, which would be expiring if he picks up the player option, and then like pair that with a couple of picks and be like, yeah, now we're going to go get whoever the best guard on, like maybe Darius Garland if Cleveland flames out, or somebody in that ilk, and just say like, yeah, like we now have our guard. We're ready to go. We don't have to worry about the Kyrie injury. We're going to try to win the championship right now with Cooper Flagg as a rookie. Is anything like that in play?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different permutations here. What a wild lottery this was, and it turns everything on its head. So many different this is why the NBA is the absolute best. I mean, people complain. There are people who complain about the NBA and the gameplay and the style of play, and I just don't think that they like basketball. But how can you not like all of the other stuff that swirls around this league? It is the silly league of all the leagues, and there's always some drama and always some entertainment. And the Mavs, the 1.8% chance to get the first pick and potentially save Nico Harrison's job, actually get it. The Spurs vault into number 2. The Sixers, who I was convinced, Sam, that they were shipping that pick to Oklahoma City, top 6 protected. They landed 3. We're going to have a lot more lottery shows coming up. We're going to have a lot of live shows coming up. As I mentioned, Sam Quinn's going to join me tomorrow night after game 5 of Denver and Oklahoma City. So come and join us live on YouTube for that one. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, hit the like button, and then the little bell symbol. Click on that. You'll get notified when we go live. So you get notified tomorrow night when we go live right here on Beyond the Arc. That's going to do it for us for right now. I got to run. There's basketball being played. I got to go watch those games. You got to go watch those games. And I'm going to be up on HQ after Knicks and Celtics, and then tonight Wolves and Warriors as well. So Sam, this was wild, buddy. Thanks for walking us through it.
This was the craziest lottery of my lifetime, and now I have to go write 100 stories about it.
All right, you go right. I'm going to go watch and then talk. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you back here on YouTube tomorrow night. Until then, thanks for watching.